Hey everybody, it's Marie Haynes here, and once again we're going to recap what's happened in the last week in search. Those of you who have been following me know that this is the first time that we're actually doing a weekly recap. We've been recapping every 2 weeks, and you'd think that I would have fewer things to talk about because it's just been 1 week, but a lot of really cool stuff has happened. So in this update, what we'll do is we'll talk about the latest Google updates and go over the things that are in my newsletter in terms of Google announcements and just things that you need to know. And then I also want to touch on some things that really are just a part of my paid newsletter, but they're too much fun to talk about, so we're going to talk about them today as well. And some of those are a really cool ranking mystery that Rand Fishkin posted about, and I think that we've got the answer to that. Also, some information on a new patent that was talked about with by Bill Swalski. And the final thing I want to talk about is my thoughts on disavowing, which have changed over the last few months. And so that should be an interesting thing to talk about. I know last week we had some issues with the sound not syncing up properly with the video, and hopefully that won't happen again today. We're switching soon to a new office, a new bigger office as we grow, which will have better internet. So hopefully that won't be an issue. And then feel free to add comments in the chat. I'll take a look at those when I'm done recapping the news. And if I can add my 2 cents, I would be happy to do that. So let's get on to the newsletter here. All right, so let's talk about the latest algorithm updates. Last time we talked about April 16th, 2018 being a significant update, and it really is shaping out to be a big one. I don't think it's quite as big as the March 7th to 9th update, but I am getting a number of emails from people whose sites had seen drops at this time. A lot of the sites that saw drops on April 16th were also sites that were affected on March 9th. And in some cases, I think Google rolled some things back. We had one client that saw incredible gains on March 9th, and the majority of those gains were clawed back on April 16th. And so we're hoping that we can reverse that. But I also think that April 23rd was another significant update. I know I have seen some people reporting that they saw changes on April 22nd, 2018. The sites that we have Google Analytics access for, a good number of them were seeing changes on the 23rd. And now when I'm sharing information on analytics, I have some clients for which I can share and some which I can't. So I can't give you, all of the examples of sites that we saw changes, but there are some, and all of the ones that we saw increases were sites that we've been working with for a long time to just overall improve site quality. And I know that's frustrating. If you were hit on April 23rd or April 16th or even March 9th, it's kind of frustrating to say, well, just improve your quality. And if that applies to you and you were hit, I would really start by reading the quality raters guidelines. Pretty much every site that we've seen that we've assessed for hits had issues that are directly discussed in these guidelines. Some of these sites too, we worked on improving technical issues as well. And it's always tough to know what we can attribute the growth to, because usually we're working on a number of different things in terms of improvements. Something that I thought was interesting was that a number of the sites that we saw improvements on April 23rd, the SEMrush data showed significant improvements that started on about the 26th. I don't know if that's an issue with how SEMrush is tracking or who knows. But anyways, it's something to take note of, because if you're looking at competitors' sites and you want to see if they were hit, if you see a change on anywhere between the 22nd to the 26th, I would attribute it to this recent algorithm change. In the newsletter, I give some examples of the kinds of things that we've seen that sites have seen improvements. It's a bit early to say exactly what types of factors were affected by the April 23rd update, but I want to go back and reiterate something that I've been talking about for March 9th, because I really feel like Google is just working strongly on relevancy and figuring out which sites are producing the best results for searchers. And again, I know this sounds kind of vague and broad, but if you were hit in the last couple of months with an algorithm update, then really look at the value that you're providing to people. Look at the sites that are ranking now and ask somebody who's not directly associated with your site whether your site is more valuable. And if you were hit, what we find is recovery generally is possible, but you usually have to find ways to make it so that you're insanely valuable as compared to your competitors. And that's really difficult to do. A few other things here. So mobile first indexing, I know you're probably sick of hearing about it, but Google apparently now is sending out some emails to tell people that, yes, your site has been moved to mobile first indexing. I'm not going to go into all the details of what mobile first indexing is. We've talked about that a lot in past emails. The main point, though, is if you get this email, you really want to annotate that on your analytics, because if things go wrong, it's really good for somebody like me or anybody who's assessing your SEO to be able to look back and say, okay, this is when we moved to mobile first indexing. Something that Jennifer Slag from the SEM Post noticed is that one of the sites that she actually received an email for to say that they've moved to mobile first indexing, it actually wasn't mobile friendly. And so apparently what Google is doing in order to determine whether to move sites over is to look at whether the content is the same on desktop as compared to mobile. And in some cases, it doesn't mean that your mobile experience is good. So we're starting to assess some sites and just look at, are you actually ready? Are the things that we're looking at are there internal links that are maybe missing from your mobile version? Or are you missing your schema on your mobile version? Things like that. So Google really wants to make it so that there isn't a crazy interruption or drops in search traffic for sites that get switched over. But I will be shocked if we don't see any repercussions from this. So I think that over the next couple of months, we're probably going to see a lot of sites that don't perform as well because they're not quite ready for mobile first indexing. This is something interesting that somebody noticed that there was, they searched for weather, and then a product that they had been interested in buying came up, and Google said, hey, we noticed the price had gone down. I don't know if this is brought on by schema or if this is a paid function, but if you're in e-commerce, it's something to pay attention to. And if any of you who are watching this have some tips on how you as a seller of products can actually get in this place, I would love to hear from you, and then we can publish that in the newsletter as well. This is another thing that's not new, but there was some new discussion about it this week. I think that it officially came out in September of last year, of 2017. And what some people are seeing on mobile, if you're using Chrome on mobile or just the regular Google browser, so this was an article that Rand Fishkin was reading, and it was about the new Avengers movie. And at the bottom of the article on mobile, it had this thing saying, you can click on this and see more sites that are talking about this Avengers movie. And so if users click on that or tap on it on mobile, it's going to take them off of the site that they were on. So that's kind of unfortunate. I don't really have tips for how to take advantage of this. I don't think that these are paid inclusions. I think it's just Google trying to improve people's browsing experience. But it doesn't work well if you're the site that Google's taking people off of. So we'll see what happens, if that causes drops in retention of readers. I think it probably will. I found this interesting. I haven't actually seen evidence of this yet, but David Gray tweeted about these big featured snippets. And when he went to one, I believe the term was something about garage remodeling or renovating or converting. And then there wasn't just one featured snippet, but there was a whole bunch of them. One talked about the cost of doing it. One talked about design. This one talked about insulation. And these were all individual featured snippets that were in the one search result. So I think these are great areas to learn about content. If you were somebody who was one of these sites that was quoted, then I would make sure that all of these questions are answered in your page. And I think that the more you can answer people's questions, the better chances you have of not only getting featured snippets, but getting more traffic as well. It looks like there was a bug in Google image search. I'm not sure if this is fixed or not, but what was happening was after you saw the first couple of lines of images, the rest of them would just be blank rectangles of different colors. And so if you do have a site that gets a lot of traffic from image search, then that's something to pay attention to. I've added this to my algo list, even though it's not an algorithm update. If you go to mariehaynes.com/algo, A-L-G-O, you'll see a list of the dates on which things like this happen that could potentially affect your traffic. My guess is that this was a temporary bug. It's probably nothing to worry about. Another bug too is Google Analytics, real-time stats. A few people were noting that this was not working. I think that's probably been fixed by now as well. Wanted to say congratulations to SEMrush as they've raised $40 million for a new expansion. So I'm excited to see what you guys are going to come out with next. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of SEMrush, and it's good that they're going to be doing even more things to improve the tool. I just put this in the newsletter, although it's not really relevant to SEO, that apparently there's a new Gmail coming, so I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen there. Most of you know that 6 years ago this week, I think we may have talked about this last week, that it was the anniversary of Penguin. I'm still talking about it because Penguin was a big deal for me and launched my career into full-time SEO. So hopefully, I know most of you are probably not happy about Penguin, but it was a good thing for me. Let's see here. There's a couple other things. What you might not know is that we've launched a podcast. We're still waiting for approval on iTunes and on Google Play Music. And there's a link here in the newsletter to SoundCloud, where for now you can get the podcast. This is a separate recording than what you're watching now. The podcast basically it just goes over everything again that you need to know in the week of search. If you want to subscribe to it and then you get a weekly update, that would be awesome. We'll talk a little bit about local SEO. So Google Posts, and that's these things here. That there's still a lot of confusion about Google Posts. If you have a business with a local presence, you should be using Google Posts. They expire after a week, and so you have to continually update them. And one thing that Mike Blumenthal noticed is that these posts are actually appearing higher up. They used to be at the end of your knowledge graph listing, and now they're higher up. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if this changes again, but the point is you need to be using Google Posts. There's some information here on how to get reviews removed from maps. And it can get complicated. I mean, you can't get a review removed just because you don't like it or because maybe it's inaccurate. It has to be pretty obviously wrong. We have had some clients where we've been able to show that, maybe it was a competitor who placed this review. And so, sometimes we can get reviews removed, but it's quite difficult. I wanted to add one tip. One of our clients, their competitor had an employee who was leaving nasty, nasty negative reviews. And so instead of going to the Google My Business forum and trying to get it removed from Google, what we did was we actually called up the business and we said, did you know that your employees are doing this? And they were mortified. And what happened was that employee got a reprimand and all of his reviews, he removed them on his own. So sometimes just picking up the phone is the best way to deal with things. And I mean, there's people out there who try all sorts of underhanded things to improve their rankings. But a lot of people are really good too. So just a tip, and that works for link building too. If you're struggling for link building, we have way better success when we actually can talk to people. But probably most of you are like me and don't actually enjoy phone conversations all of the time. But still, it's a good tip to know. Let's see here. I still don't know a whole lot about this works at thing. Your Google My Business listing, I kind of think what it's supposed to be is, for example, if there was a dental practice that was listed at one particular address, and maybe there were 5 different dentists that work there, then each of these dentists could have their own Google My Business listing and say that, yes, we work at this practice. any of you who are in the local space, if you have more information on that, I'd love for you to contact me, and we could write some more clarification maybe in a future newsletter. Let's see here. So, and then Q&A, which is still a massive mess. We should all be monitoring our knowledge panels for our Google My Business listings for Q&A. Apparently, Google's doing better now with actually sending emails, and apparently the customer's name is in the email now. So we'll we'll see how that goes and whether that improves things. So let's get off of screen share here, and we'll get back to me. So let's talk about a couple of these other things that that were interesting and that we've covered in the paid version of the newsletter. I still want to talk about them because I think they're really important for anybody who's in SEO to pay attention to. One of them is this patent that Bill Sawalski wrote about. It's a Google patent that is about PageRank. And so we know that PageRank is changing, it's changed dramatically from when it first was created. And PageRank initially was primarily about links. And we all know that if a high authority site links to a lower PageRank site, that'll actually help the lower PageRank site. And this new patent, from what I understand, what it does is it looks at which sites to trust as high authority sites. And what this means, I think this is probably one of the reasons why a lot of PBNs are no longer working. And in the newsletter, I have a big long explanation as to why I think that that's the case. But I also think that this patent is part of the reason why we had to wait for 2 years for Penguin to update. So those of you remember that we went from October of 2014 to September of 2016 without a Penguin update. And right in the middle, October of 2015, was when this patent was first submitted. It was just recently granted, actually on the 6-year anniversary of Penguin. And so I think that this was Google's attempt to figure out which links to count and which links to ignore. And we'll see if I can explain this properly. But if Google knows which links to count now, then that's why they can say they'll ignore links like spammy Viagra, pharma spam, porn links, things like that. And so if you're getting, a crazy amount of spam links like that, I still think in most cases you can ignore those. But, and we'll get into this a bit more with the disavow information that we'll talk about. The point is that you want to get links from sites that are authoritative. And this speaks to EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust, that I've been talking about for quite some time. And so here's the thing. I mean, we don't have time to get into all of how do we improve EAT, but the point is that if you're getting links, you want to get links from places where they're recognized as authorities, and don't waste your time link building from these little sites. Now, I should put a caveat on that. I mean, if you're a local business and a local blogger wants to link to you, then that's fantastic. But the point is that you don't want to be buying links, because Google knows the places where you can buy links and knows that they can't trust that. I've said this a few times, but Gary Ish from Google has said that they know which parts of Forbes are the good parts where they can trust them. And they know that if you get a link from the contributor section in Forbes, ignore that. And so I think a lot of people are putting purchasing links in the contributor section, and it's probably not helping you at all. So let's talk, we'll come back to that discussion when I talk in a minute about my thoughts on disavowing. The other thing that I want to talk about just briefly is this ranking mystery that Rand Fishkin posted about. So Geraldine, Rand's wife, had this really funny article about cinnamon rolls. And when you search for the article, what comes up is not her site, but the Medium article. So she wrote the article, she published it on both Medium and her own site, and added a canonical tag to the top of the document. And what should happen if Google respects the canonical is that Google says, okay, this post is written on both of these sites, but the canonical tag points to everywhereist.com, which is Geraldine's site. And so we should attribute everything to that site. All the links that point to the Medium article should point to Everywhereist. And that's the page that should rank well. However, when you do the search terms, Geraldine's article doesn't rank anywhere. There was a really good discussion on Twitter of people who found, there were some slight issues in the HTML. And I think, though, that Patrick Stocks actually found the problem for this. And it blows my mind because we were just talking about this, that the problem is that Medium has a script in the head of their document. So those of you who know even just a little bit of HTML, you know that there's the head has a head, and then the closing of the head of the document, and the canonical tag should be in the head. And what we found was that there's actually a script in there. And when you have a script in the head of a document, it can actually break Google's ability to see what's underneath that script. And so Patrick talks about how you would find this. I write about that in the newsletter. We don't have time to get into all those details now. But I think this is an issue that Medium should be fixing. Hopefully they change their code, and that problem should be resolved. So finally, let's talk a little bit about disavowing. And you know that I've filed so many disavows. There were times where I would probably file at least one disavow a day. And then when Penguin refreshed or updated in 2016, Google kept saying, well, we're really good at ignoring links now. And yet they would not come out and say, you don't need the disavow tool anymore. So I was always confused about this, because if it's true that Google is ignoring links, then why would we need to disavow? Because we're disavowing telling Google to ignore links, right? So that just doesn't make sense. And then I started thinking, if Google won't come straight out and say this, why is it? And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is that there's a really good case study that was done that shows that a site that had some paid SEO links, and they actually did some disavow work and saw really, really nice improvements after this. And in most cases, when I've seen these like semi-case studies, it's hard to say with certainty that the disavow actually was what helped, because usually the site's working on other things at the same time. And in this particular example, they say they weren't working on other quality issues, and it was the disavow that they think actually helped. Now, that's just one case study. With that said, though, in the last few months, we've started to take on a few link audits. What I've been telling people is, if I think you have SEO-made links, I'm not talking about ultra spammy, negative SEO type attempts, things like that. I'm talking about links that you purchased, or widespread guest posting with potentially keyword anchors, those types of links, the types of things that could get you a manual action. We have been recommending, let's go ahead and do a link audit and file a disavow. And we have one case that is very similar to what was discussed in this case study, where we're actually seeing significant improvements. And I do attribute that to the disavow. Now, it's just one case. It's not enough. I don't feel it's enough for me to write about at this moment. We're currently doing another monster link audit for a site that has a lot of unnatural links as well. And so if we see similar results after filing a disavow for that site, then I'll start being more vocal, more public about publishing why you should be disavowing again. So the point is not to drum up business for link audits, but rather just to say, let's pay attention to this. I still think that the vast majority of sites do not need to be using the disavow tool. And I think that most, some sites can do more harm than good in using the disavow tool. So we'll see. We'll keep things in mind with that. I think that's all we've got. It doesn't look like we have any comments in the chat. I'll give it just another minute here in case if any of you want to add a comment, then I'm happy to give my thoughts. But if not, we'll likely move on. And so, so I guess that's it. I'm happy to hear your feedback. If you enjoyed this, please let me know. We're going to try to do this every single week, which is a fair amount of work, but I really enjoy it. And we have had some good feedback that most of you are enjoying the information as well. So with that, I'll end it here, and I wish you the best with your rankings this week. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me at mariehaynes.com/contact, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.